The sound of iron horseshoes striking packed dirt echoed through the dawn as Zadie Bennett stumbled down from the stagecoach, her wrists raw from the rope binding them. The year was 1876, and Zadie had never imagined she'd find herself in Chisholm Ranch, New Mexico territory, being sold like cattle to pay her late father's debts. "Move along now," barked the debt collector, yanking her forward by the elbow. "Auction's about to start, and you're the prime lot." Zadie's eyes frantically searched the gathering crowd of ranchers and cowboys, desperate to locate her younger sister, Zora. They'd been separated at the previous stop, Zora taken to a different ranch while Zadie continued onward. The sisters had clung to each other, screaming and begging not to be parted, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. "Where's my sister?" Zadie demanded, her voice cracking with emotion. "You promised we'd be sold together." The debt collector, a weasel-faced man named Hatcher, merely laughed. "Changed my mind. Got a better offer splitting you up. Your sister fetched a fine price at the Blackwater Ranch. You'll do even better here." Zadie felt her knees weaken. At 22, she had spent the last 4 years raising 18-year-old Zora after their mother's death. Their father had gambled away their small Kansas farm before dying of pneumonia 3 months ago, leaving behind nothing but debt. When Hatcher came to collect, he'd found the sisters had nothing of value except themselves, their labor, to be sold by contract for the next 5 years. "Please," Zadie whispered, "she's all I have left." "Should have thought of that before your pa ran up his debts," Hatcher replied without sympathy. "Now smile pretty for the gentleman, that'll drive up your price." The auction block was nothing more than a wooden platform hastily erected in front of Chisholm Ranch's general store. As Zadie was pushed up the steps, the morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street. A small crowd had gathered, weathered ranchers, saloon girls, and curious townsfolk. "What we have here is a fine specimen," Hatcher called out, circling Zadie like a vulture. 22 years old, healthy as a horse, can cook, clean, sew, and manage a household. Contracts for 5 years of service, gentlemen. Who'll start the bidding at $50? Zadie kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to make eye contact with the men evaluating her like livestock. She thought of Zora, gentle, innocent Zora who had never spent a night away from her until now, and felt sick with worry. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure on horseback watched the proceedings with narrowed eyes. Declan O'Malley had arrived in Chisholm Ranch just yesterday, following rumors of contract auctions. At 30, the cowboy had spent most of his life on horseback, working cattle drives across the territories. His sun-weathered face and calloused hands spoke of years of hard labor, but his eyes held a kindness that few in the territory possessed. $75, called a voice from the crowd. 85, countered another. Declan's jaw tightened as he observed the young woman on the platform. Her shoulders were squared despite her obvious distress, her chin held high in quiet defiance. Something about her spirit moved him. $100. Shouted a rancher Declan recognized as Jacob Thornton, owner of the notorious Thornton Ranch where workers were treated little better than slaves. $150, called another voice. Thornton's face reddened. $200, the crowd murmured in surprise. It was a steep price for a contract. Declan urged his horse forward, parting the crowd. $300, he called clearly, his voice carrying across the gathering. A hush fell over the auction. Hatcher's eyes gleamed with greed. $300 from the gentleman on horseback. "Do I hear $350? Thornton turned to glare at Declan. "You're new around here, cowboy. This ain't your business." "I'm making it my business," Declan replied evenly. $350, Thornton growled. $400, Declan countered immediately. Zadie's gaze snapped to the stranger on horseback. Something in his steady, calm demeanor made her breath catch. He didn't leer at her like the others. Instead, he looked directly into her eyes with an expression that seemed to say, "Trust me." After several tense moments, Thornton spat on the ground. "She ain't worth that much trouble." He stomped away, leaving Declan the victor. "Sold to the Cowboy for $400. Hatcher announced triumphantly. He gestured for Zadie to step down from the platform. Declan dismounted and approached, contract papers in hand. As Hatcher completed the transaction, Zadie finally found her voice. "Why?" she asked quietly when Declan stood before her. "Madam, I've got my reasons," he replied, his voice low. "But I promise you this, you won't be treated as property on my watch." "My sister," Zadie said desperately. "She was taken to Blackwater Ranch. We were separated. Please, I need to find her." Something in Declan's expression shifted. "Blackwater, you say? How old is your sister?" 18. "Her name is Zora. She's all I have left in this world." Declan nodded slowly, a decision forming in his mind. "I've heard stories about Blackwater, no place for a young woman." He signed the contract with a quick scrawl. "Miss Bennett, I just purchased your contract, but I'm not your owner. Consider yourself employed with fair wages set aside after your debt is settled." Zadie blinked in confusion. "I don't understand." "Your sister," he said simply. "We're going to find her." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in Zadie's chest. "You would do that for a stranger?" Declan's weather-beaten face softened slightly. "Some things a man just can't stand by and watch. Selling sisters apart is one of them." He untied the ropes from her wrists, his touch gentle on her raw skin. "My ranch is a day's ride from here. We'll rest there tonight, gather supplies, then head to Blackwater tomorrow." As they left the auction behind, Zadie felt the weight of curious stares. A woman riding alongside a lone cowboy would certainly start tongues wagging, but she found she didn't care. All that mattered was finding Zora. "I don't even know your name," she realized aloud as he helped her onto his horse. "Declan O'Malley," he replied, swinging up behind her. "Former Texas Ranger, current cattle rancher." "Zadie Bennett," she responded, though he already knew her surname from the contract. "Former farmer's daughter, current." She trailed off, unsure what to call herself. "Current free woman," Declan finished for her, "who happens to be working for me until her debt's paid." They rode out of Chisholm Ranch as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Zadie acutely aware of the strong arms on either side of her, holding the reins. She didn't know if she could trust this stranger, but for now, he represented her only hope of reuniting with Zora. Declan's ranch sat nestled in a valley 20 miles from Chisholm Ranch, a modest spread with a small herd of cattle and a sturdy cabin built with his own hands. As they approached, Zadie noted the well-maintained fences and the small garden plot beside the house. "It's not much," Declan said, almost apologetically, "but it's honest work and it's mine." "It's beautiful," Zadie replied sincerely, taking in the rolling pastures and distant mountains. After months of uncertainty, the peaceful scene stirred something in her heart. They dismounted, and Declan showed her inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room containing a cooking area and table and 2 separate small bedrooms. "You can take that room," he said, pointing to the door on the right. "I'll sleep in the bunkhouse tonight." "The bunkhouse?" Zadie questioned. "Don't you live here alone?" "I do now," he replied, a shadow crossing his features. "Built the bunkhouse when I thought I'd have hands to help with the cattle. Plans changed." Zadie sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. O'Malley, but I can't stop thinking about Zora. Blackwater Ranch, what do you know about it?" Declan's expression darkened as he put coffee on to boil. "Owned by brothers Silas and Emmett Warren. Bad reputation. They buy contract workers cheap and work them hard." especially the women. Zadie's blood ran cold. What do you mean, especially the women? Declan hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Stories say they don't just buy contracts for ranch work. The younger women sometimes end up working in their saloon in Bent Creek. A saloon. Zadie whispered, horrified at the implication. Zora is innocent sheltered. She wouldn't survive such a place. That's why we're leaving at first light, Declan assured her, placing a cup of hot coffee in her hands. Blackwater's a 2-day ride. We'll need supplies and a horse for you. I have no money, Zadie admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. Consider it an advance on your wages, Declan replied matter-of-factly. You can work it off later. That night, Zadie barely slept, her mind filled with worries about Zora. She rose before dawn, finding Declan already awake and preparing the horses. You're up early, he noted, tightening a saddle cinch. Couldn't sleep, she admitted. I keep thinking about what Zora must be going through. Declan nodded in understanding. We'll find her, he promised. I've packed food and bedrolls. We'll need to camp on the trail tonight. They set out as the first rays of sunlight crested the mountains. Zadie rode a gentle mare Declan called Daisy, while he rode his stallion, Thunder. The trail to Blackwater Ranch wound through canyons and across open plains, the New Mexico landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. As they rode, Zadie studied her companion. Declan O'Malley was not what she'd expected in a cowboy. He was educated, speaking well and with knowledge of the world beyond the territory. Yet he was clearly at home in this rugged country, reading the land and sky like a book. May I ask why you left the Texas Rangers? She ventured when they stopped to rest the horses at midday. Declan's expression remained neutral, but Zadie noticed the tightening of his jaw. Lost faith in the badge, he said simply. Saw too many men with power abuse it. Decided I'd rather live by my own code. Is that why you bought my contract? Your code? He met her gaze directly. Partly. No one should own another person's freedom, Miss Bennett, not even for debt. And yet you hold my contract now, she pointed out. On paper only, he countered. I aim to help you earn it back fair and square. They made camp that evening in a sheltered canyon, Declan building a small fire while Zadie prepared a simple meal from their supplies. As darkness fell, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Tell me about your sister, Declan said, breaking the quiet. Zadie's face softened with affection. Zora's the kindest soul you'll ever meet, always sees the good in people, even when they don't deserve it. Our mother died when she was 14, and I've looked after her since then. She paused, emotion catching in her throat. She's smart, taught herself to read from our mother's Bible, dreams of becoming a teacher someday. Declan nodded, his expression thoughtful. And your father, the debt collector, mentioned gambling. Zadie's expression hardened. He wasn't always that way. After Mother died, something in him broke. Found comfort in whiskey and cards instead of his daughters. She stared into the fire. We lost the farm bit by bit. By the time he died, there was nothing left but debt. That's a heavy burden for you to carry, Declan observed. Not as heavy as wondering what's happening to Zora right now, Zadie replied softly. She's never been away from me before. Declan studied her across the firelight, admiring her strength in the face of such adversity. We'll reach Blackwater by tomorrow afternoon. I plan to offer to buy her contract straight business transaction. And if they refuse, his eyes met hers, determination evident, then we'll find another way. The night passed slowly, each wrapped in their own thoughts. When dawn broke, they continued their journey, the terrain growing rockier as they approached Blackwater territory. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge that overlooked Blackwater Ranch. Unlike Declan's neat, modest spread, this was a sprawling operation with multiple buildings, corrals full of horses and bunkhouses for workers. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and men on horseback patrolled the perimeter. "Looks more like a fortress than a ranch," Zadie observed nervously. "The Warrens are paranoid men," Declan replied. "They've made enemies all over the territory." They approached the main gate where two armed men stopped them. "State your business," demanded one, his hand resting on his pistol. "Name's Declan O'Malley," Declan replied evenly. "Here to speak with Silas Warren about purchasing a contract worker." The guards exchanged glances. "Wait here," one said, before riding toward the main house. While they waited, Zadie scanned the property desperately for any sign of her sister. Workers moved about, men mending fences and tending livestock, women carrying laundry and water. None were Zora. After several tense minutes, the guard returned. "Mr. Warren will see you. Follow me." They were led to the main house, a two-story structure that spoke of wealth acquired by whatever means necessary. Inside, they found Silas Warren seated behind a massive desk, a cigar clamped between his teeth. He was a large man with a bushy beard and cold eyes that assessed them with open suspicion. "O'Malley," he greeted without warmth. "Don't believe we've had the pleasure." "We haven't," Declan confirmed. "I'm here on business." Warren's gaze shifted to Zadie, his expression turning predatory. "And what kind of business brings a man and a pretty woman to my doorstep?" Declan stepped slightly in front of Zadie. "I understand you recently acquired a young woman's contract, name of Zadie Bennett. I'm interested in purchasing it." Warren's eyebrows rose. "Bennett, you say?" His gaze returned to Zadie with new interest. "Any relation? She's my sister," Zadie stated firmly. "We were separated against our wishes." Warren leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Well now, ain't that touching? Family reunion and all." He took a long pull on his cigar. "Thing is, I've already put the girl to work. She's proving valuable." "Where is she?" Zadie demanded, fear giving way to anger. "I want to see her." Warren's smile disappeared. "You're not in a position to make demands, Miss Bennett." "Your sister's contract belongs to me." "I'm prepared to offer $500 for it," Declan interjected smoothly. "That's more than double what you likely paid." Interest flickered in Warren's eyes. $750. $600, Declan countered. "That's my final offer." Warren studied them for a long moment. "She's worth more to me where she is. She started work at my establishment in Bent Creek last night." Zadie felt the blood drain from her face. "Your establishment?" "The Blackwater Saloon," Warren confirmed with a smirk. "Pretty young thing like her draws in the customers. Got her serving drinks for now, but if she keeps bringing in business." He let the implication hang in the air. Declan's hand moved to his gun belt, but Warren was quicker, drawing a shotgun from beneath his desk and pointing it at them. "I wouldn't," he warned. "My men would cut you down before you reach the door." "She's 18 years old," Zadie pleaded, desperation in her voice. "Please, she's innocent." "Not for long," Warren replied coldly. "Now, I've been hospitable, but my patience is wearing thin." "You've got your answer. The girl stays where she is." Declan's voice remained steady. $800. Warren paused, considering. "Mighty generous offer for a ranch hand. What's your real interest in this girl?" "That's my business," Declan replied. "Do we have a deal?" After a tense silence, Warren lowered the shotgun slightly. "No deal. But I'm a businessman. Come to the Blackwater Saloon tonight. Maybe we can negotiate after you see how valuable she is to my operation." His smile returned, cruel and calculating. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." They were escorted off the property, Zadie trembling with rage and fear. Once they were a safe distance away, she turned to Declan. "We have to get her out of there," she said, her voice breaking. "That man, what he's implying." "I know," Declan replied grimly. "And we will." But we need to be smart about this. The Warrens have men everywhere in Bent Creek. They rode to the small town, a collection of buildings centered around a dusty main street. The Blackwater Saloon dominated one end, its gaudy facade promising whiskey, women, and gambling. "We need a plan," Declan said as they secured rooms at the only boarding house in town. "I'll go to the saloon tonight as Warren suggested. You stay here where it's safe." "I'm coming with you," Zadie insisted. "Zora needs to see a familiar face." "It's no place for a lady," Declan argued. Zadie's eyes flashed. "I stopped being a lady the moment my father gambled away our future. I'm coming, Mr. O'Malley, with or without your approval." Declan recognized the determination in her expression and nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to me. These places can get rough." As evening fell, they prepared to enter the lion's den. Zadie washed the trail dust from her face and smoothed her hair, wishing she had better clothes to wear. Declan checked his revolver and tucked a derringer into his boot as backup. The Blackwater Saloon was in full swing when they arrived, piano music and raucous laughter spilling onto the street. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of cheap perfume. Men crowded around tables playing cards, while saloon girls in revealing dresses circulated with trays of drinks. Zadie scanned the room desperately for her sister, ignoring the curious and sometimes leering gazes directed her way. A respectable woman in a saloon was an unusual sight. "There," Declan murmured, nodding toward the bar. Zora Bennett stood behind the counter, pouring whiskey with shaking hands. She wore a dress far too revealing for her modest nature, her face pale and drawn. When she looked up and saw Zadie, the tray she was holding clattered to the floor. "Zadie," she whispered, as if afraid to believe her eyes. "Zora," Zadie pushed through the crowd, Declan close behind her. The sisters reached for each other across the bar, hands clasping desperately. Tears streamed down Zora's face. "You came for me," she sobbed. "I knew you would." "Of course I did," Zadie replied fiercely. "I'll always come for you." Their reunion was cut short by a heavy hand on Zora's shoulder. Emmett Warren, Silas's younger brother and manager of the saloon, glared at them. "Back to work, girl," he growled. "Spilled liquor comes out of your pay." His gaze shifted to Zadie and Declan. "You must be the folks Silas mentioned. He's waiting in the back room." They followed Emmett through the crowded saloon to a private room where Silas Warren sat playing cards with several men. He dismissed them with a wave when Declan and Zadie entered. "Right on time," he observed, gesturing to empty chairs. "Have a seat." "I've seen enough," Declan said, remaining standing. "The girl doesn't belong here. My offer stands $800 for her contract." Warren studied them with amusement. "You know, I've been thinking. Two Bennett sisters would be quite the draw." His gaze lingered on Zadie. "I might be persuaded to sell the younger one's contract if you'll throw in the older sisters as well." "That's not happening," Declan stated firmly. "Miss Bennett is employed by me." "Is she now?" Warren's smile was knowing. "In what capacity, I wonder?" Zadie felt her cheeks burn with indignation. "Mr. O'Malley has treated me with nothing but respect," she said coldly. "Unlike you and your operation." Warren's expression hardened. "Careful, Miss Bennett. Your sister's welfare depends on my goodwill." The tension in the room was palpable. Declan's hand hovered near his gun while Warren's fingers drummed impatiently on the table. $1,000, Declan said finally. "For Zora's contract, that's more than generous." Warren considered the offer, greed warring with stubbornness in his expression. "She's been a good investment so far. Drew twice the usual crowd last night." "She's a person, not an investment," Zadie snapped, unable to contain her anger. Warren ignored her, focusing on Declan. $1,200 and you've got a deal." Declan nodded without hesitation. "Done." Zadie stared at him in surprise. It was an enormous sum, far more than he'd paid for her contract. Warren grinned triumphantly. Cash only. You bring it tomorrow morning and I'll sign over the contract. I want to see the contract now, Declan insisted. Make sure everything's in order. After a moment's hesitation, Warren retrieved a document from a safe in the corner. Declan reviewed it carefully, confirming it was legitimate. And the girl stays with us tonight, Declan added. As a show of good faith, Warren's eyes narrowed. The contract isn't transferred until the money changes hands. She stays here. Then we all stay, Declan countered. We'll get a room upstairs and meet you in the morning. The negotiation continued for several tense minutes before Warren finally relented, agreeing to release Zora for the night with the understanding that they would return with payment in the morning. When they finally emerged from the back room with Zora in tow, Zadie could hardly believe they'd succeeded. She wrapped her arms around her sister, feeling her trembling with relief. "Thank you," Zora whispered to Declan as they left the saloon. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "No need," he replied simply. "No one deserves to be treated that way." Back at the boarding house, the sisters shared a room, spending half the night talking and crying together. Zora recounted her ordeal, the fear, the humiliation, and her desperate hope that somehow Zadie would find her. "He bought your contract?" Zora asked incredulously when Zadie explained how she'd met Declan. "Just to help you find me. He's a good man," Zadie replied softly. "Different from any I've known." Zora studied her sister's expression with newfound understanding. "You care for him." Zadie looked away, unwilling to examine the feelings that had begun to stir within her. "He's helping us, that's all." But later, when Zora had finally fallen asleep, Zadie lay awake thinking about Declan O'Malley, his quiet strength, his unwavering principles, and the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. It was foolish, she told herself, to develop feelings for a man she barely knew, especially one who technically owned her contract. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest whenever he was near. Morning came too quickly. Declan met them for breakfast, his expression serious. "I've got the money," he said quietly, "but I don't trust Warren to honor our deal without tricks." "What do you mean?" Zadie asked. "Men like him don't like to lose," Declan explained. "I want you both to be ready to leave town quickly if things go south." They returned to the saloon as agreed, finding Silas Warren waiting impatiently. The morning light streaming through the windows revealed the seediness of the establishment that had been hidden by darkness the night before. "Let's make this quick," Warren said, holding out his hand. $1,200 for the girl's contract. Declan placed a heavy pouch on the table. "Count it." As Warren tallied the money, Declan positioned himself between the Warren brothers and the Bennett sisters, his posture alert for any sign of trouble. "It's all here," Warren finally acknowledged, pocketing the money. He pushed the contract across the table. "She's all yours, though I still think you're overpaying for damaged goods." Zora flinched at his words, and Zadie put a protective arm around her shoulders. "The contract," Declan said evenly, ignoring the provocation. Warren signed the transfer document with a flourish. "Pleasure doing business with you, O'Malley. You ever get tired of her, my offer for both sisters still stands." Declan's jaw tightened, but he simply collected the contract and nodded toward the door. "Ladies, time to go." They were halfway to the exit when Emmett Warren called out, "Hold up there." Declan turned slowly, his hand dropping casually to his side where his revolver hung. "You forgot something," Emmett said, holding up Zora's small bundle of personal belongings. When she stepped forward to take it, he grabbed her wrist. "That'll be another $50, room and board costs." "That wasn't part of our agreement," Declan stated coldly. "It is now," Silas interjected, standing to join his brother. "Unless you want to renegotiate the whole deal." The atmosphere in the saloon shifted dangerously. Several men who had been lounging at tables stood up, clearly Warren's men waiting for trouble. "Let her go," Zadie demanded, stepping forward. Emmett sneered. "Or what, sweetheart?" His words were cut short as Declan's fist connected with his jaw, sending him staggering backward. Zora wrenched free and ran to Zadie's side. "That was a mistake," Silas growled, reaching for his gun. Declan drew faster, his revolver aimed steadily at Silas's chest. "I paid fair price for the contract. We're leaving now with no further charges." For a tense moment, it seemed the situation would escalate into bloodshed. Then a new voice cut through the standoff. "Everything all right in here, gentlemen?" All eyes turned to the entrance, where Sheriff Thomas Miller stood watching with keen interest, his badge gleaming in the morning light. "Just a small business disagreement, Sheriff," Silas said smoothly, lowering his hand. "Nothing to concern yourself with." Sheriff Miller's gaze moved from the Warrens to Declan and the Bennett sisters. "That true, O'Malley. Contract transfer," Declan replied evenly. "All legal and paid for. We were just leaving." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Then I suggest you do so." "And Warren, we've talked about causing disturbances in town." With the sheriff's presence diffusing the situation, Declan ushered Zadie and Zora outside. They didn't speak until they reached the stables where their horses waited. "That was close," Zadie breathed, her heart still racing. "Too close," Declan agreed, checking the contract one last time to ensure it was properly signed. "Let's put some distance between us and Bent Creek before they change their minds." They rode hard for the first few hours, Zora sharing Zadie's horse until they were well away from Warren territory. Only then did they slow to a more comfortable pace, the relief of their escape settling over them. "I can't believe you paid so much," Zora said to Declan as they made camp that evening. "How will we ever repay you?" "You don't owe me anything," Declan replied, building a small fire. "I couldn't leave you there knowing what would happen." Zadie watched him from across the campfire, a question forming that had bothered her since the beginning. "Why did you do it, really?" "Buy my contract at Chisholm Ranch, then spend a small fortune on my sisters." Declan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "My younger sister," he finally said, his voice soft with memory, "was sold to a man like Warren when I was away fighting in the war. By the time I returned and tracked her down, it was too late." Pain flickered across his features. "I swore I'd never stand by and watch another family torn apart if I could help it." Zadie felt tears sting her eyes at his confession. "I'm so sorry about your sister." Declan nodded in acknowledgement. "What happened to her is why I left the Rangers." Too many men with badges looking the other way when it comes to how women are treated in this territory. His vulnerability in that moment touched Zadie deeply. She saw beyond the strong, capable cowboy to the man beneath one who carried deep wounds, yet still fought for what was right. The journey back to Declan's ranch took 3 days, during which a comfortable companionship developed between the three of them. Zora's natural optimism began to resurface as the trauma of her experience at Blackwater faded. She peppered Declan with questions about his cattle, his time as a ranger, and life in the territory, her curiosity insatiable. "Your sister is remarkable," Declan commented to Zadie as they rode side by side, Zora having moved ahead to examine a wildflower. "After everything she's been through, she still sees beauty in the world." "She's always been that way," Zadie replied with affection. "Even when things were at their worst with father, she found reasons to smile." "You raised her well," he observed. "I did my best," Zadie said softly. "Though I failed to protect her in the end." "No," Declan countered firmly. You never stopped fighting for her. That's not failure." Their eyes met and held, something unspoken passing between them that made Zadie's heart beat faster. She looked away first, uncomfortable with the intensity of her feelings. When they finally arrived at Declan's ranch, both sisters were exhausted but relieved. The modest cabin felt like a sanctuary after their ordeal. "We can't impose on you indefinitely," Zadie said as they settled in that evening. "Once we've rested, we'll need to find work elsewhere." Declan looked surprised. "There's no need. I meant what I said about fair employment. There's plenty of work here for both of you if you want it." "You'd hire us both?" Zora asked eagerly. "The ranch needs attention I haven't been able to give it alone," Declan explained. "The garden's overgrown, the cabin needs care, and I could use help with the cattle." He paused, meeting Zadie's gaze. "Stay as long as you like. Build up some savings until you decide what you want to do next." The offer was generous, almost too generous. Zadie found herself torn between gratitude and caution. Her experiences had taught her that people rarely gave without expecting something in return. "Why would you do that for us?" she asked directly. Declan's expression was open and honest. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because—" he hesitated. "Because the ranch has been a lonely place since I built it. Having you both here would bring it life again." The simple truth in his words disarmed her. "Thank you," she said softly. "We accept. For now." In the weeks that followed, a routine developed that brought comfort to all three of them. Zora, with her natural affinity for growing things, took over the garden, coaxing vegetables and flowers from the sun-baked soil. Zadie managed the household and learned about cattle ranching from Declan, discovering she had a knack for it that surprised them both. Declan, for his part, seemed to find new purpose in teaching the sisters about ranch life. He was patient with their mistakes, generous with his knowledge, and respectful of their opinions. The cabin, once merely a place to sleep, became a home filled with conversation and laughter. As spring turned to summer, something else blossomed as well, feelings between Zadie and Declan that grew deeper with each passing day. She found herself watching him as he worked with the cattle, admiring not just his strength but his gentleness with the animals. He, in turn, sought her company in the evenings, their conversations stretching long into the night after Zora had gone to bed. On a warm July evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Zora had already retired, complaining of a headache from too much sun in the garden. "I've been thinking," Declan said after a comfortable silence, "about your contracts." Zadie tensed slightly. The contracts had rarely been mentioned since their return to the ranch. "What about them?" "I want to tear them up," he said simply. "Consider your debts paid in full by the work you've both done here." Zadie stared at him in disbelief. "But it's only been a few months. The contracts were for 5 years. "I never intended to hold you to them," Declan admitted. "They were just a means to get you both safely away from men who would exploit you." Emotion welled in Zadie's chest, gratitude, relief, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "Declan, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay anyway," he replied, his voice low and earnest. "Not because of a contract, but because you want to." The invitation hung in the air between them, laden with meaning beyond the simple words. Zadie felt her heart racing as she recognized what he was truly asking. "And if we choose to leave?" she asked, needing to understand the full extent of his offer. "Then I'll wish you well and be grateful for the time you were here," he answered honestly. "But I hope you won't." In the fading light, his face was half in shadow, but his eyes held an emotion that made Zadie catch her breath. Slowly, giving her every chance to move away, Declan leaned forward until their lips met in a gentle kiss. It was brief but perfect, a promise of something more if she wanted it. When they parted, Zadie found herself trembling slightly. "I thought I was just your employee," she whispered. Declan smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in the way that always made her heart skip. "You haven't been just my employee since the day I met you, Zadie Bennett." The admission of his feelings should have frightened her after everything she'd been through, but instead, it felt right, as if the path that had seemed so dark and uncertain had been leading her to this man all along. "I'll stay," she said softly. "Not because of the contract, but because I want to be here. With you." The next morning, true to his word, Declan brought both contracts to the breakfast table and with ceremonial flourish tore them in half before the astonished eyes of the Bennett sisters. "You're free women," he announced. "Whatever you do from now on is your choice alone." Zora clapped her hands in delight. "Does this mean we can stay forever?" Declan's gaze moved to Zadie, warm with affection. "I certainly hope so." The weeks that followed were the happiest Zadie could remember since before her mother's death. Without the shadow of the contracts hanging over them, she and Declan grew closer still, their relationship deepening into a love neither had expected to find. Zora, observing their blossoming romance with approval, took to teasing them mercilessly. "When's the wedding?" she would ask at the most inopportune moments, causing Zadie to blush and Declan to clear his throat awkwardly. But the question, for all its teasing nature, wasn't far from either of their minds. By late summer, as they sat beneath the stars after a long day's work, Declan took Zadie's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled. "Maybe so, but these thoughts won't leave me be." He took a deep breath. "Zadie Bennett, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but out here in the territory, life moves at its own pace. I can't imagine this ranch or my life without you in it." Zadie's heart hammered in her chest as she recognized what was coming. "I'm not a wealthy man," Declan continued, "but everything I have is yours if you want it. My ranch, my name, my heart." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple silver ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Zadie's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. 6 months ago, she had been sold at auction, her future bleak and uncertain. Now she was being offered a life with a man who respected her, valued her, and loved her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Declan O'Malley." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman strong enough to thrive in this unforgiving land. You're the strongest woman I've ever known." Their kiss sealed the promise, sweet and tender under the vast New Mexico sky. Zora's reaction to the news the next morning was a mixture of exaggerated surprise and genuine joy. "Finally!" she exclaimed, hugging them both. "I was beginning to think I'd need to propose for you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. The entire community from Chisholm Ranch attended, curious about the cowboy who had rescued 2 sisters from auction and contract servitude. Sheriff Miller himself came from Bent Creek, bringing news that the Warren brothers had been arrested for numerous violations, their contracts with other workers declared void. Justice, it seemed, had finally caught up with them. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Declan expanded the cabin to accommodate their growing family, adding a dedicated room for Zora and enlarging the main living area. The 3 of them worked side by side, building not just a home but a future together. "I've been thinking," Zora announced one evening as they sat around the dinner table, "about what I want to do with my freedom." Zadie and Declan exchanged glances. They had always known that Zora, with her dreams and ambitions, might eventually want to leave the ranch. "I want to be a teacher," she continued, confirming Zadie's suspicions. There's a normal school in Santa Fe that's accepting women. I could study there and come back to start a school in Chisholm Ranch." "That's a wonderful idea," Zadie said, though her heart ached at the thought of being separated from her sister again. "I've saved enough from my wages," Zora said proudly, "and it's only for a year. Then I'll come back, I promise." Declan nodded his approval. "Education is something this territory sorely needs. You'd be doing important work." The decision was made, and with mixed emotions, Zadie and Declan accompanied Zora to Santa Fe in the spring of 1877. The parting was tearful but hopeful, so different from their forced separation a year earlier. "This isn't goodbye," Zora assured her sister. "It's just until next spring, and I'll write every week." "You better," Zadie replied, embracing her tightly. "And remember, you always have a home with us no matter what." As they rode back to the ranch without Zora, Zadie felt a momentary sadness that Declan quickly noticed. "She'll be back before you know it," he assured her, "and we'll have news of our own to share by then, I imagine." Zadie looked at him in confusion. "What news?" Declan smiled mysteriously. "You've been tired lately, queasy in the mornings. My mother was a midwife, I recognized the signs." Zadie's hand flew to her stomach, realization dawning. "You think I'd stake my best cattle on it," he replied, his voice tender. "We'll need that extra room sooner than we thought." Joy blossomed within her at the possibility. Their child growing inside her. It was a blessing she hadn't dared to hope for so soon. Declan's prediction proved correct. By the time Zora returned the following spring, having completed her studies with distinction, Zadie was cradling their newborn son, Daniel Thomas O'Malley, named for Declan's father and the sheriff who had helped them escape the Warrens. True to her word, Zora established a small school in Chisholm Ranch, starting with just 6 students but quickly growing as families recognized the value of education. She lived with Zadie and Declan, her presence bringing delight to young Daniel, who adored his aunt. As the years passed, the O'Malley ranch prospered. Declan's cattle business expanded, while Zadie developed a reputation for breeding and training the finest horses in the territory. They added a daughter, Margaret, to their family 2 years after Daniel's birth, and twins, Joseph and Samuel, 3 years later. Zora never married, dedicating herself instead to her students and to being the beloved aunt who taught all 4 O'Malley children to read before they were 5 years old. "I have all the family I need right here," she would say when asked about her single status. "And every child who comes through my schoolhouse is partly mine." On the 10th anniversary of the day, Declan had purchased Zadie's contract at the Chisholm Ranch auction. They held a celebration at the ranch, now a substantial property with a fine house, multiple barns, and grazing land as far as the eye could see. As they stood together watching their children play, Zadie leaned against her husband's strong shoulder. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the life they had built together. "That day when you saw me on the auction block." Declan's arm tightened around her waist. "Not in my wildest dreams," he admitted. "I just knew I couldn't let you be sold to Thornton." He kissed the top of her head. "Best impulse I ever followed." "And the most expensive," Zadie teased. $1,600 for 2 Bennett sisters." Declan laughed, the sound still making her heart skip after all these years. "Cheapest deal I ever made," he countered. "Look what I got in return, the love of my life, 4 beautiful children, and the finest ranch in the territory." From across the yard, Zora called them to the table where a feast was laid out. Their friends and neighbors gathered round Sheriff Miller, now retired but still commanding respect, the circuit preacher who had married them, ranchers from nearby spreads, and families whose children attended Zora's school. As Declan raised a glass in toast, Zadie looked around at the community they had built, the family they had created, and felt a deep contentment settle in her soul. From tragedy and injustice had come something beautiful, a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of love. To freedom, Declan toasted, his eyes meeting Zadie's with all the love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. And to finding family in the most unexpected places. To freedom and family, the gathering echoed, glasses raised high against the backdrop of the New Mexico sunset. And as Zadie's gaze moved from her husband to her sister to her children, she silently added her own toast to the cowboy, who had changed everything by buying 2 contracts and reuniting 2 sisters, never knowing he was creating the foundation for a legacy that would endure for generations to come.